Hi everyone, it's Peter Schiff. This is Wednesday, December 23rd, 2009. Well, we've been getting a lot of economic data the last couple of days. Yesterday we got the final revision of third quarter GDP. The number came in at 2.2%. Now remember, the government originally reported this number as 3.5%, and then it went down to 2.8, and now they've got it at 2.2. So the original estimate was way off, I think something like 40% it looks like. And of course, all of this phony economic growth is merely a function of Americans spending borrowed money, most of it supplied as part of the stimulus. And of course, we've taken on trillions of dollars in debt to get what amounts to a very small artificial boost in GDP. You know, coming out of prior recessions, especially deep recessions like the one we just had, we've had GDP quarters of 6-8% growth. And that's with hardly any stimulus. Here, you know, they've thrown everything but the kitchen sink, and all they can get is 2.2% growth. And again, it's not really growth. We've simply dug ourselves into a deeper hole. You know, it's amazing how the politicians and the people on Wall Street still haven't figured out that spending is not the way to get out of debt, that our economy is not going to improve by borrowing more money and spending it. What we really need is more production. We need to invest and save and produce our way out of this crisis. And unfortunately, we're doing the opposite. That was confirmed again today by the personal income and spending numbers that came out. Personal income was up 0.5, or rather personal income was up 0.4, spending was up 0.5. Once again, Americans spent more than they earned. Somehow the savings rate was unchanged at 4.7%, but it's still much too low. You know, we've gone through a decade where we went on a consumption binge. We're way in debt. We need to save our money. We need to replenish our savings so we can finance capital investment so that we can have a real recovery. But that's not going to happen with a 4.7% savings rate. You know, speaking about, you know, a decade of going on a consumption binge, you know, it was Time magazine recently that proclaimed the decade that's now coming to an end, the decade from hell. Now, of course, this is the same Time magazine that made Ben Bernanke Man of the Year. Now, what Time magazine doesn't understand is that the decade that we're ending is not the decade from hell. This is the decade that is paving the way to hell. This is the decade that is leading us to hell. The decade from hell is the decade that we're about to enter. You see, this last decade, we have been committing all the sins. And that's the reason that the economy is now going to hell. And if anything, it's going there in Ben Bernanke's handbasket. You know, it's ironic that Time magazine thinks Ben Bernanke should be the Man of the Year, yet they think this last decade was the decade from hell. Ben Bernanke was instrumental in creating the problems with Alan Greenspan that are going to make the next decade, unfortunately, the actual decade from hell. Now, I wanted to speak a little bit today. Also, one thing I wanted to mention, I know that the last decade, they're talking a lot on the news that this last decade was the worst decade ever for the stock market. And it just shows you, you know, how wrong people can be. Because if you remember the end of the last decade, 1999, it was still near the top of the internet bubble. There was nothing but hysteria. Imagine how many people in 1999 with the NASDAQ near 5,000 would have imagined that the next 10 years would be such a disaster, where the S&P is down 20% and the NASDAQ is down even more. The NASDAQ is down, what, 50%? Who would have thought that 10 years ago? And as wrong as the people were who were so optimistic 10 years ago about the stock market, they're just as wrong today. Like Time magazine thinks that the next decade is going to be a lot better. You know, it's going to be much, much worse because of all the things that we did wrong in this decade, particularly a lot of the things that Ben Bernanke is still doing wrong, but for which Time magazine honored him with Man of the Year. But I wanted to talk a little bit about this health care bill that's going through Congress and the constitutionality or lack of constitutionality of what they're doing. I mean, there's so many things about this bill that are unconstitutional. First of all, there's nothing in the Constitution that gives the government any authority to legislate, to tax, or to spend for health care. I mean, the word health care, the word doctor, the word medicine, none of this appears in the Constitution anywhere. It's not like they didn't have doctors back in 1776, that people didn't get sick. Of course they did. But it wasn't considered a federal function. It wasn't written into the Constitution. And remember, the Constitution has to specifically delegate a power to the federal government or it doesn't have it. That's what Article 1, Section Section 10 says. Also, if you think about this aspect of it, this bill mandates that American citizens buy health insurance or they're going to get fined. Now, there's nothing in the Constitution that says the federal government can mandate that one private citizen has to buy the product of another citizen. I mean, that's not in there. They can't do that. And look at the principle that we established. If the government can require us to buy health insurance, well, then they can require us to buy whatever they want. There's nothing that says it's limited to health insurance. So who knows what's next? Once you open up the Pandora's box, once you say the government has the power to do something, you set this bad precedent. And so right now it's making us buy health care. Who knows what products they might dream that we think we have to buy and mandate that we buy them, and who's going to benefit from that. But of course, another unconstitutional aspect of this plan is that it lacks uniformity. You've heard that Nebraska, and I think also maybe Louisiana, got special deals. Their senators were able to negotiate special deals. I think in the case of Nebraska, the other 49 states are going to be obligated to pick up 100% of the tab of the expansion of Medicare in Nebraska. Now, there's a constitutional provision requiring uniformity in Article 1, Section 8. I actually have my handy Constitution here, and let me read you the very first paragraph of Section 8. The Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises, to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States, but all duties, imposts, and excises shall be uniform throughout the United States. Now, the whole concept of uniformity has to do with the fact that excises or these types of taxes need to be applied equally all over the United States. The founders didn't want certain states to vote for taxes that would be paid by residents of other states, but not their own. And the same thing applies to benefits. The benefits that are tied to those taxes cannot be given to some states at the exclusion of others. They have to be applied uniformly throughout the United States. Obviously, these special deals being granted to key states in exchange for votes violates this whole principle of uniformity. And of course, if the Supreme Court allows this, now again, now that we've set this precedent, what else are we going to have? What other kind of special deals and backroom deals are going to allow politicians from one state to impose taxes on citizens of another, or to extract benefits for their state that simply have to be paid for by citizens of another? It's obviously not a constitutional bill, but again, it lacks constitutionality on so many fronts. But unfortunately, the Supreme Court does not live up to its constitutional function. It does not enforce the Constitution. It lets the government get away with murder. I'm sure a lot of the things the government is doing, they're going to justify it under the Commerce Clause or under the Necessary and Proper Clause. But anybody who understands the Constitution, who has read the founding documents, who's read the Eliot debates, understands what the Constitution means. The Constitution is not written in Chinese. The Constitution doesn't need to be interpreted. The Constitution is clear, and the Constitution needs to be enforced. And the Constitution applies to the federal government. The Constitution is protecting our rights by limiting the power of the government, limiting how they can tax us, limiting how they can regulate us, and limiting how they can spend our money. Unfortunately, the government today acts as if the Constitution imposes not a single restraint on the federal government. They do whatever they want, and the Supreme Court sits back and lets it happen. Anyway, that's it for today. I'll try to blog again before Christmas, but if not, happy holidays, everybody. Take care. And don't forget to listen to Wall Street Unspun tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific. Oh, and one more thing I wanted to mention. This YouTube video goes up on my YouTube channel, The Schiff Report. If you haven't signed up for Schiff for Senate, that's my other YouTube channel, Schiff for Senate. And I'm probably going to start coming out with some purely political video blogs that won't be on this website, that they're just going to be released on the Schiff for Senate YouTube site. So if you haven't done so, go and sign up for Schiff for Senate so you will be notified when I post videos to the Schiff for Senate site. And that site is also linked to at the bottom of my SchiffForSenate.com webpage. Anyway, that's it. Take care, everybody.